from the vision of the 2030 Agenda, quotes, "We envisage a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination, of respect for race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, and of equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity, a just, equitable, tolerant, open, and socially inclusive world in which the needs of the most vulnerable are met." Now, who wouldn't want to live in a world like that? This formulation looks back to the Universal Declaration's own opening fundamental articles, which guarantee equality and non-discrimination, and it foregrounds the central pledge of the SDGs to leave no one behind. So friends, this is a critical moment in Kenya, in the region, and globally. We all know the 4 C's of the polycrisis: COVID, climate, conflict, the cost of living. The promotion and protection of human rights is vital to tackling these challenges, be they economic, developmental, environmental, or security related. And they are fundamental, these rights, to ensuring that all people can equally enjoy the freedoms set out in the Universal Declaration. On this 75th anniversary of the Universal Human Family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And so to stand up for human rights for all, in order to achieve the promise of the SDGs by 2030, to ensure we leave no one behind, and that we build a just, fairer, and more sustainable world for us all. Asanteni sana.
Dr. Stephen Jackson, thank you very much. Opening remarks and just setting the stage for what we'll be doing here today, and a reminder of where we need to go. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm welcome to the Director General of the United Nations Office in Nairobi, Zainab Hawa Bangura. She'll give her opening remarks, and she will also...
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Honorable Justin Muturi, Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, on his way, who will be representing His Excellency President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Chair and Commissioners of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, Chair and Board members of the Independent Policy Oversight Authority, Reverend Dr. Samuel Kobia, Chairperson of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission of Kenya, civil society and human rights defenders, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all, and a very warm welcome to the United Nations office at Nairobi in our Gigiri complex. At the end of Second World War in 1945, as the world emerged from crisis, the United Nations was created to maintain international peace and security and uphold international law. The United Nations Charter, in its preamble, reaffirms faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in equal rights. Indeed, one of the purposes of the United Nations, as set out in the Charter, is promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and fundamental freedom for all, without distinction. 3 years later, on 10 December 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a milestone document drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations. For the first time, the Universal Declaration set out fundamental human rights and freedoms that are universal, indivisible, and inalienable, belonging to all human beings equally without distinction. Today, we come together to mark a very special Human Rights Day, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Throughout this year, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has spearheaded a global Human Rights 75 initiative to reaffirm the values of the Universal Declaration and recommit to human rights as the pathway to address the challenges of today and the future. The high-level events being held globally today in Geneva, here in Nairobi, Bangkok, and Panama aim to forge a renewed consensus on the universality and indivisibility of human rights, and to reflect on priorities for the promotion and protection of human rights in the next 25 years. Here in the regional hub for Africa, we will explore the vision and role of human rights for the future in Africa through the perspective of different actors. It is clear that the challenges are great across the continent and globally. It is also clear that we need human rights to be able to address these challenges effectively, inclusively, and sustainably. Human rights are one of the key pillars of the United Nations and a set of fundamental values that underpin the system. You heard from Stephen Jackson. As the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, said, healthy and sustainable societies are based on three pillars: peace and security, sustainable development, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. There can be no long-term security without development. There can be no long-term development without security. And no security can long remain prosperous without the rule of law and respect for human rights. Human rights are inherent to each one of us and unite us in our common humanity and aspiration. On this Human Rights Day, let us reaffirm our commitment to uphold human rights for all, across the continent and around the world. In closing, it is my honor to deliver the following Human Rights Day message on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and I quote, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The iconic opening sentence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is as important today as it was when it was adopted 75 years ago. The Universal Declaration is a roadmap helping to end wars, heal divisions, and promote lives of peace and dignity for all. But the world is losing its way. Conflicts are raging. Poverty and hunger are increasing. Inequalities are deepening. The climate crisis is a human rights crisis that is hitting the most vulnerable hardest. Authoritarianism is on the rise. Civil space is shrinking, and the media is under attack from all sides. Gender equality remains a distant dream, and women's reproductive rights are being rolled back. Today, it is more important economic, civil, and political, which protect us all. The Universal Declaration shows the way to common values and approaches that can help resolve tensions and create the security and stability our world craves. As we work to update global frameworks and make them more effective in the 21st century, human rights must have a unique and central role. I call on member states to use this 75th anniversary and the Summit of the Future next year to strengthen their commitment to the timeless values of the Universal Declaration. And on Human Rights Day, I urge people around the world to promote and respect human rights every day for everyone, everywhere. End of quotes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Madam Bangura, and also for delivering the remarks from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And, it's interesting what you say about, when the declaration was made, it came after a world crisis, and rights movement forward and ensure justice and human rights for all. So this is an important time in our history. 75 years on, we look forward to what happens next. And as we've said, we shall be having a pledging session happening later this day to just recommit ourselves to the future of the human rights of the world. And like we said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be having discussions with members of private sector, elected members, those in the human rights space, human rights defenders. That is all going to be happening here today, as well as activists, artivists, and many others. At this moment, ladies and gentlemen, I would like us to give a warm welcome to our chief guest today, who is just making his way up here, Honorable Justin Muturi, the Attorney General for the Republic of Kenya. Honorable Attorney General, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to hearing from you later on in the sessions today. We thank you for making the time to be with us today and for indeed making your commitment towards human rights. So we are looking forward to that session that will be happening in a short while. But now also to just remind you that, like we said at the start of this is a global event from Bangkok, Panama, Nairobi, and Geneva. And at this point, I believe we are ready. We can connect to Geneva and the high-level event that is taking place at the Palais des Nations. For global opening remarks, we're going to be hearing from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk. So, ladies and gentlemen, it would look like, so anybody who's ever said anything about Kenyan timing, well, I think that has been debunked here today. We are on time. Can we give ourselves a round of applause for that? So we seem to be well ahead of Geneva with 2 minutes to go. And thank you, Kenya, for showing the world how it can be done. And at this moment, I think we can continue to just have conversations around this. Can I indulge all of you for a moment, please, on what human rights means? You all have mics in front of you. Maybe first row, second row, third row. If you can, in just one sentence, tell us what the last 75 years have been and what you're looking forward to the next 75. If you are, you just want to maybe put up your hand and let me see you. And in a gentle warning, if I don't get any volunteers, I may volunteer you. Can we have any? Yeah. Irungu, go for it.
Good morning, everybody. 60 years ago, we managed to wrestle colonialism away from our republic in one of the most iconic anti-discriminatory struggles of all time, the struggle against racism. It is now our responsibility as a generation to take that to the next level, to make sure that nobody is identified and profiled and discriminated against on the basis of their identity, and that includes sexual minorities, people who have no homes, young men in Mathare who are targeted by police officers, and homes that are knocked down to build roads. Thank you.
Irungu Houghton from Amnesty International, thank you very much for that contribution. Yes, gentleman at the back, and then, so after him, then you in white. All right.
Good morning. My name is Paul Masese from Center for Enhancing Democracy and Good Governance. Corruption remains one of the greatest impediments to realization of human rights. On the 9th, just the day before yesterday, the world commemorated the Anti-Corruption Day. Here in Kenya, and indeed the whole of Africa, corruption continues to take away the right to food, the right to health care, the right to education, the right to everything. All rights are actually compromised by corruption. My prayer, and what I would request from our chief guest today, is to commit more on fighting corruption. All we're grappling with, including the forces that the coordinator mentioned, can be dealt with if indeed we are serious about fighting corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Reiterating, one of the biggest challenges to accessing human rights, and that is corruption. Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Christine Kandie. I'm from Baringo, and I work with the indigenous group. And our focus is indigenous women and people with disability. As we celebrate 75 years of human rights, I wish to maybe bring on board the voice of people with disability. For a long time, we've been at home. We've been attached to so many cultural norms like a curse. But now, today, as much as we are not equally on the table with everyone else, we celebrate because at the moment, we are fighting for our space. We've understand about our rights. I do understand that here in Kenya, the policy that governs rights for people with disability was last reviewed in 2003. There is a lot of gap. So as we celebrate this day today, I want to put on the table that we do understand that that one means a lot of discrimination. Our voice has been undermined. So I wish to bring that one on board as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. I'll go to the lady in the back, and then we'll come to you, sir, in the front. I see you both.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Karen Wamboyo Manga. I'm from Nyando Social Justice Center in Kisumu County. As we celebrate today, I'm looking forward to able to activate in coolness, and that the government is going to understand that we are not fighting, we are not policing, but we are working in coordination, or we are complementing their work, and I'm looking forward to working together peacefully without being branded or even being intimidated, discriminated as human rights defenders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, sir.
Well, my name is Kamau Ngugi from the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, or Defenders Coalition. At this point, I'm thinking of the people living in the Mau Forest, the Ogiek indigenous people that in the past 3 months are being evicted despite a court. They must be respected. The pains of the 500 people that happens always in the rainy seasons, where children, women,
Thank you for that. So the gentleman, I see you in black. Yes, you. And then we will come to you, sir, in the front.
Son of a network called Environmental Rights Organization, is a led network, land and environmental defenders. And I want to say this, globally, there has been threat. Biodiversity, in terms of conserving our environment, and therefore, as a land and environmental defender, I look forward to, as we get into a trajectory of, human rights issues, that never like before will land and environmental defenders be targeted, and I hope they will protect, we will protect our environment and conserve our biodiversity without threats from states. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rashid. And yes, environmental defenders also playing a key role in, the 4 Cs that Dr. Stephen Jackson had talked about earlier. Yes, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm Hazem Shabad, the ambassador of the State of Palestine. And I think this would be a very good opportunity to stress upon the importance of the universality of human rights. No one and no place should be left behind. Failure to do so just adds more devastation to very fragile lives around the world, and failure to implement human rights in an equal manner around the globe is not at all constructive. Any double standards in this, as we have seen for many decades in different areas in the world, and in particular Palestine, I believe is a recipe for more destabilization and violations of human rights that take place on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I see the lady in the back, and then we'll come to you in the front. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Naila Abdallah. I'm a human rights activist, gender activist. I want to emphasize on the issues of gender-based violence across the globe, that we still have a raised concern on women issues that affect across the world, on issues of gender-based violence, domestic, sexual assault, and human rights trafficking. There's a lot we need to do as human rights defenders, human rights declaration, human rights stakeholders on issues of ending gender-based violence across the world. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Good morning. I'm Praxidis Torore, Commissioner, Independent Policing Oversight Authority. As we celebrate the 75th Declaration of Human Rights, I think as Kenya, we also want to celebrate the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which made strong provisions under Chapter 4 on the freedom, on the Bill of Rights. And these also saw the establishment of a number of constitutional commissions that protect human rights, such as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and even the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, which represents the citizen against police excesses, and the National Gender and Equality Commission, amongst others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It would seem we've been on this side of the room. Thank you. Thank you for taking that up. Can we have a little bit more on this side? Madam in yellow, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Salima Jokima Sharia with Inuka Kenya NCC organization. I think what I want to see going forward is more resource allocated to mental health. I mean, all the threats, all the risks, all the intimidations that are targeted towards human rights defenders have a bearing on their psychological well-being. But nothing much is being done in terms of protection, promotion, and resource allocation towards mental health. The other thing that I want to know and see is the government also increasing the budget. Currently, we have 0.01% of the total budget allocated to mental health. And that is to cater for all Kenyans, not only human rights defenders. So maybe we need to be serious with the issues of mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. And now more than ever, when we are seized of that matter and how important it is, and speaking about it a lot more and recognizing it as well as one of the key aspects of the access to health. Do we have another one? Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Wangeshi from Independent Medical Legal Unit. I'm looking forward to seeing a real shift from the rhetorics of protection and defense of human rights to practical action, enforcement of the law, adhering to our great constitution, but also flexible financing to human rights civil society, because there's a huge gap there and it cannot be done without strong partnerships and collaboration. I really do look forward to that. Thank you.
Rhetoric to action. Thank you very much. Let's give a warm round of applause for that. And also some very specific commitments to financing, whether it's mental health or every other aspect of ensuring and upholding human rights. Can we have a few more before we move on to our next? Okay, good, great. So, lady in white. Sorry, where is that? Oh, here. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't see you. So before we come to this side of the room, let's hear from you, ma'am. I'm sorry,
Thank you very much, moderator. Finally, you saw me.
I'm so sorry.
My name is Dr. Joyce Mwikali Mutinda, the chair of the National Gender and Equality Commission. And looking back to 1948, I'm very grateful to those who came up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I must say I'm again grateful to the United Nations for coming up with several conventions for various groups. Just to give an example, we have CEDAW, 1979, focusing on women. We have the child, that is 1989. And then we have the Declaration on Minorities, 1992. We have Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008. However, 75 years later, nobody has thought of older members of society. And we continue arguing about the aging people in this globe, and there is no convention that focuses on them. Why are we leaving them behind? Going forward, I would look forward to seeing a convention on the rights of the older members of society in the world, because they are being left behind and we are having an aging population. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. So I had seen lady in white, and then I see you at the front, and then you at the back. We have about 2 minutes to go, so I'm sorry if you can. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marianne Wanjiro from the Wango Kanja Foundation, and today I'm thinking more on survivors of sexual violence. And I think also it's very important that we ask ourselves why we are still struggling with service delivery for survivors of sexual violence, why they are unable to access quality medical, emergency medical response, why also we are struggling to make sure that they access justice, why their cases are taking years and years in court. So I think we need to think around that, and we need to address the gaps and challenges that survivors of sexual violence are experiencing when they are accessing medical, psychosocial, and legal support.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, you, madam. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Nuria Golo. I come from Marsabit County, CEO Marsabit Women Advocacy and Development Organization. I thank all the human rights defenders for the work they are doing, because things are not the way they used to be. At least we are moving on. But my concern is, coming from Marsabit County, a county which is always struggling with emergencies. It's either drought, floods, and what have you. Right now, people are dying, and all the county budget is going into emergencies, year in, year out. What will the government do so that our county budget goes into development and the government cares for emergencies when it happens? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Better planning. I want to thank you all for your views. I would like to ask your indulgence. I know I had promised you. We are ready to go to Geneva at this moment, but do not worry for the global opening remarks by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Yeah. Okay, just give me a cue. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say a very warm welcome to this event marking the 75th anniversary of the university. I've been working with the BBC on radio and television. I only just left in August this year, and as I like to say, I'm retired, but I'm not tired yet. Thank you very much for coming. Now, as I said, it's a very important occasion, an occasion for unity, to learn lessons, and to craft a vision for the future. This is part of a year-long event, so this is not just isolated. It's a year-long event that has been going on around the world. It's an initiative by the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner to reaffirm the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and recommit to these rights as the numerous challenges facing the human rights of global citizens today. We've got a lot of events packed for today. we're here all day, and I hope all of you can stay with us. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be somber. It's going to be refreshing from here. As I said, these events have been going on worldwide for a year, and today we'll be joined by hubs from Nairobi and Panama. Nairobi is actually joining us live now, and we'll be hearing a message from them. Apart from these human rights hubs, we're also joined by hundreds of people who have been unable to make it to Geneva today, but are joining us online. We want to say a warm bienvenue to all of them. Be interpreted in the international sign language. That is also available. Now, as I said, we've got
Before we start, I would like us all to observe a moment of silence to honor and mourn the victims of human rights violations all over the world. Thank you. In the ashes of global warfare, it brought hope. To put an end to cycles of bloodshed, it promised justice. It promised development that would be secure, equitable, inclusive. It set out the path to peace. Because 75 years ago, in adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all member states of the newly born United Nations acknowledged this deep truth. Recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, I'm glad to welcome you to this global event. It encapsulates a year of passionate and probing conversations across the world about the Universal Declaration, and it seeks to project that energy forward as we face our challenging future. You, our participants, come from every region and many walks of life, and that diversity of origins and outlooks reminds us that the rights set out in the Universal Declaration are exactly that, universal. Those who live in poverty, or those who glide through the corridors of power, all human beings are born equal in dignity and rights. From this commitment, many movements of liberation have drawn their strength. Women and men beaten down by exploitation stood up and demanded justice. They joined independence movements and toppled oppressive empires. They confronted repressive regimes and won freedom. They brought segregation and apartheid to an end. They created partnerships with former adversaries. They achieved accountability for unbearable crimes. And they struggled and continue to struggle for an end to all forms of discrimination, for social protection, for decent conditions of work. This energy and vision on the part of communities across the world have nourished the immense creativity and resulting development that much of the world now enjoys. But alongside the progress that has transformed many of our societies, there have also been numerous failures to uphold human rights over the past 75 years. We live among such failures today, with the turmoil and profound and interlocking challenges that stem from the failure to uphold human rights. The guide to their solution exists. It was drawn up at a time of horror after the most monstrous mass killing of the world has ever known in the form of the Holocaust, and with the knowledge that total destruction was growing closer. It has demonstrated its power and efficacy over decades. It bridges every sector of government and field of human endeavor. And it resonates with the ancient wisdom that connects all human beings. The Universal Declaration is African values of interdependence, cooperation, and collective responsibility, to Islam's emphasis on human dignity and the principle of zakat, compassionate sharing, to the freedoms of the on universality and indivisibility of many Latin American voices. The drafters of the Universal Declaration transcended geopolitical clashes and economic differences. They set aside many terrible disputes to achieve this luminous text, which lit the path to peace, justice, and freedom. And so I view today's event as a call to hope and a call to action. At a time of so little solidarity and so much divisive and short-sighted vision, I view it as a call to overcome polarization, a call to work with courage and principles together to resolve the huge challenges that we face, a call to hark back to the spirit that led every member state to adopt the Universal Declaration and to base the intrinsic and equal value of every human life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. High Commissioner. As he said, so many challenges across the world today, a lot of work to be done, and that is the purpose of these events this year. As I said, also have musical interludes, some really wonderful music that affirms the commitment of the cultural world to these human rights. And we're going to start this morning with our first...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Nairobi, Kenya, from Geneva. And everything he has said is exactly what we're going to be doing here. And that makes sense in our local and regional context. Great conversations, like we said, the role of our rights empowerment in the country and indeed in the region. So some great work from some people who dared to do things and say things at a time when perhaps it was a little difficult to do so. So just to give you a bit of a tidbit, we will be hearing, both hearing from and watching one Mr. Errol. So we urge you to stay with us throughout the day. If you can, it will be really great. I promise you it'll definitely be worth your while. At this moment, I'd like us to move to the next session that we're having here, which is our panel discussion. And at this moment, before I introduce you to our panelists and invite them up here, I would like to kindly request our key guests who are seated up here to please take your seats, who've been doing great work, both on an African level, legislative, in the private sector, and human rights defenders and actors in the civil society space. So you are going to be hearing from them on their reflections of the last couple of years and looking to the future, perhaps the next 10 years and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my panelists, after which we can give them a warm welcome to our stage here today. Ladies and gentlemen, our first panelist, Jahira Wangari. She's a feminist scholar activist. She's a disability inclusion expert and founder of the support group Muscular Dystrophy Society of Kenya. Guest lecturer on disability at universities in the United States, Ireland, and South Africa. Also joining us here is Hilda Stewart Dadu, who's an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania and a human rights defender with experience in gender equality, sexual and reproductive health rights. She's the national coordinator of the Coalition for Women Human Rights Defenders in Tanzania. Also joining us on our panel this morning is Kariuki Ngare, the Chief Executive Officer of the Standard Chartered Bank, spearheading efforts on sustainability, gender parity and inclusion, and also serves as board vice chair of the Global Compact Network Kenya, which is focusing on all the areas of sustainability, 10 core principles in areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. Then also joining us here is Honorable Yusuf Hassan Abdi, Member of Parliament representing the people of Kamkunji constituency, and perhaps I would say inaugural chair, perhaps, of the Parliamentary Caucus on Democracy and Human Rights, which was launched in early 2023. He has served in the National Assembly and in the United Nations in various locations around the world, and happy to say, a journalist just like myself. Thank you very much. Then last but certainly not least is someone who has been here with us on the podium, Honorable Solomon Ayele Derso, who's Commissioner of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, previously served as the chair of the Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a warm welcome to all of our panelists as they make their way up here to begin our conversation today. Do you need me to move? Yeah, sure, no problem. That's all right. I'm new to this panel, and thank you for. Perhaps let's get to understand from you in the space in which, particularly your reflections, from the start to where we are now.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Good morning, everybody, all protocols observed. I want to give myself the image description for myself for the purposes of, our colleagues who might not be able to perceive us visually. I am a brown-skinned woman. I sit in a wheelchair, and I have short black hair, and I'm dressed in a blue and I'd say it's pink, but I'm colorblind, some color. So to your question, Yvonne, thank you so much. And I want to start by saying that persons with disabilities, we've always been in existence. Let's start there. We've always been around. And we are in multiple stories of origin. If you look at the African continent and among indigenous people, there are persons with disabilities. And I also want to remember that 75 years ago, on the continent, there was institutionalization of persons with disabilities, whether on the basis of mental health disabilities, on the basis of having a disability that is marked so severe that you cannot be in community, and thus, it is decided that it's better for you to be in an institution. That continues to happen. And part of that, we're seeing that currently we have the Africa Disability Protocol, which, as far as I know, we have 11 signatures. We need 15 for it to come into effect. And that what it does is to actually localize beyond having the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Therefore is Virginia, whom we fondly know as Wambui Otieno. And she joined the Mau Mau when she was 16. I didn't know this. What I know about her is that she was married to a Luo man, and then later the biggest thing, quote unquote, scandal was that, she married a man who was much younger than her by decades. And also she had a limp. So I'm claiming her as one of ours, but someone with a disability. And she also had a pacemaker. So and it's a thing of rewriting. We're being erased so much from histories. So hopefully today that I'm going to rewrite part of what we have done as young people and as persons with disabilities and marginalized.
Getting that narrative out there. And that is what helps to ensure that we promote that and we know and understand our history. And that, of course, helps to give inspiration to many other young people and those from diverse groups in Kenya and around the world. Hilda, in
celebrating this anniversary of UN Declaration for Human Rights, the experience from the CSOs is a bit ambiguous. Although the declaration paved the way to provide a framework that recognizes human rights and provides a framework whereby everyone should own the human rights, but in the context of protecting human rights, as women's human rights defenders and human rights defenders, there are kept themselves in a dangerous space whereby most of these threats are coming from the community as a protocol that provide protection for human rights defenders and women's human rights defenders, but at the community level and at the national level, the struggle is still the human rights. We still also have the human rights. We still also have the struggling to make sure that protection mechanism set a good standard for protecting these human rights defenders who are in front line to protect human rights at national level. But having this framework with development in countries, but we are lack that this declaration in the protocols of the need to make sure that countries and member states of the UN declaration that
all of this happens in a global space, so to speak, in public and private sector. Kariuki, as CEO of Standard Chartered Bank and also with the Global Compact Network, business is involved in this respect, perhaps through the promotion of sustainable business practices. What's been that contribution towards upholding human rights, do you think?
Thanks, Yvonne. I think, first of all, it's very important to realize how important this occasion is. Because sometimes it's very easy to take a lot of things for granted. And coming at the backdrop of our 60th anniversary as an independent country, it's when you listen to history and the people start sharing, especially some of our parents who are there at that time and very young, they start sharing the stories then. A little more on Article 23, which talks about employment and what is associated with it. The private sector has a very, very big role to play. For instance, when you talk about, and I'll start with gender because that's what we're talking about, how do you ensure that historically the disadvantaged gender, which has been predominantly female, is now front and center of the private sector, whether it's at the board level, whether it's at the executive level, or it's the employment level. And how do you ensure you do that deliberately to ensure that the female gender is well represented? At Standard Chartered, we believe, and our aspiration is always to be at 50-50. When we talk about our total employment, we want to ensure that female and male 50-50. Currently, within the majority of our staff, we are about 53 female, which is excellent for us. The executive, at about 45% female, and the board is about 35%, which demonstrates you have to take actions to be able to, because that's where it starts. You have to be very deliberate. That's one. And then you also have to ensure that you are an inclusive company, and we consider Standard Chartered as very inclusive. Because it's one thing, if you bring in people, you must ensure they're included. Because you can open taking into account their special needs, and you're addressing them, and you're not seeing those special needs as a cost, but knowing that this is something you must deliberately do. And that is something that we consciously go out of our way to do that. And it's one thing that at Global Compact level, we're also encouraging companies to be very conscious of that do not discriminate because, because of gender. You must be inclusive, and you ensure that once you bring people in, you also must make sure they're included. I'll never forget, one person with disability told me, there's diversity, but not inclusion. And I had to think about what that means and say, okay, what does this exactly mean when someone tells you, yes, there is diversity, but we are not seeing inclusion. And then going out of the way as an organization, and for me as a CEO to deliberately ensure that inclusion is there. And then in matters of sustainability, for instance, we are talking a lot about today about matters of sustainability. The private sector has another big role to play. And for us as a bank, is how do you ensure that your suppliers, they are also adhering to these rules and regulations? We are now going a lot into outsourcing work. You start hearing about sexual harassment. You start hearing about discrimination. As an organization, you have to be responsible for that and do something about it. And that is why, as companies, it has to be very deliberate again. You have to hold them to account and ensure that all your partners are adhering to the same standard. Industries or businesses that probably make a lot of money, but you're not involved in them. For instance, gambling. It's very deliberate. You have to be deliberate and say, even if there's money, we believe that this industry may not be good for society, and that is something you have to do. And now we are starting to talk about, we are talking a lot about climate change, we are talking about matters, climate, and now we are starting to bring that to center and play. What is every company doing our partners, our stakeholders, what are they doing to deliberately ensure that we are starting to be part of the conversation, and we are ensuring that we are not destroying our environment and our earth, our only earth, for future generations. I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. There can be diversity without inclusivity. It is possible, and therefore there has to be a very deliberate effort to ensure the two. You talked about intent and deliberation and putting your money where your mouth is, actually investing in it. We'll come back because I want to hear from all of you about, what the next 10 years looks like, because there's been obviously quite some work done. There's obviously been quite a few moments we have missed. But let's continue now, because we've heard about private sector and the investments that are being made there. What about on the legislative front? Honorable Abdi, what is the role, or what has been the role of Parliament in your experience in terms of promoting the adoption of the Universal Declaration?
Thank you, Madam. I would say that, in fact, Parliament is by itself a product of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you look at our Parliament, there are two factors that promote that. One is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because without it, we wouldn't have the democratic rights and human rights that we enjoy now in our country. And if you look at our history, we have had a long history of a period of repressive government. I am a member of Parliament. So we ourselves have been influenced by the existence of the United Nations Charter and the underpinning international human rights laws as proclaimed in the Universal Human Rights Declaration. And I think our job as parliamentarians is to legislate in an equitable, just manner, to produce legislations that are based on the foundation of human rights. And we are there to make sure that our government and our institutions also abide by and uphold our Constitution, which actually acknowledges the Universal Human Rights Declaration. And as such, I would say that Kenyan Parliament works very closely and is guided very closely by human rights, the human rights principles enshrined in the Universal Declarations.
Thank you very much, Honorable Yusuf Abdi, for that. And we will talk about what that role looks like in the future, how that evolves to continue to provide legislative and oversight functions on behalf of the people and being representative of the same. Now, let's take a look at what's happening regionally as well. Honorable Daso, what has been the role of regional bodies in promoting human rights?
Thank you very much. I would like to start off by wishing us all a very happy 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I am pleased to bring you the greetings of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. This is the regional human rights body established in 1981 on the basis of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. This is equally a historic document on its own right, on par with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and indeed drawing on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It provides for and lists what we call all the three generations of human rights: the traditional civil, the so-called traditional civil and political rights, the second generation economic, social, and cultural rights, and not any less important, the collective rights of peoples. That is why we have the rights of peoples on par with human rights in the title of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948, Africa, like much of the developing world, was under the grip of colonial rule. And there are parts of the world that didn't, therefore, form part of the humanity that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was imagined to apply. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by virtue of the ideals and values that it espouses, created a language, created a legal norm that made it possible for people under colonial rule and apartheid. This is the background behind the reference to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the Charter establishing the Organization of African Unity on par with the United Nations Charter, because it provided a very powerful language and frame of reference for overcoming colonial rule and apartheid. Similarly, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is cited on par with the UN Charter in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We in Africa, and indeed like the rest of the world, have come a long way since the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 75 years ago. We now, because of the inclusion into the African Charter of the rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the debate about whether or not human rights are a foreign construct has come to an end. It is no longer possible to speak of human rights as something that we as Africans are not entitled to, that are not inherent in us. We have come a long way in establishing institutions for the promotion and protection of human rights, both globally but also here on the African continent. From my own commission, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, to the Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child of African Unity, the right of the African Union to intervene in any country in respect to what it calls grave circumstances, namely genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. And these are encapsulated globally in the 2005 outcome document of the UN General Assembly, the responsibility to protect. And institutions have been established globally as well, such as the International Criminal Court, to establish accountability and justice. We have come, indeed, a long way. Honorable Member of Parliament of Kenya, Honorable Yusuf, told us about its enunciation in, and paradoxically today, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Dr. Stephen Jackson, that the world is losing its way. This is a quote. And earlier on, we have also heard from the UN High Commissioner how the world is losing its way. I think there are a number of issues that we need to put on the table here in order for us not necessarily to regain, but also to actually really put a mirror in front of ourselves with respect to many of the issues that we are facing. The 4 C's have been mentioned earlier on. If we refer to COVID-19, COVID-19 became that magnifying glass that exposed all our societies the lack of provision for the very basic necessities that are a prerequisite for living a life of dignity for masses of our people on this continent, I dare say elsewhere in the world. That is what COVID-19 exposed to us. That we have neglected, that we haven't invested in economic, social, and cultural rights, that we have prioritized civil and political rights. And therefore, the question for us is, are we now willing to give the equal level of recognition that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights gave to economic, social, and cultural rights on par with civil development goals? One of the three fundamental united huge spaces, and in the process rolling back some of the gains that have been achieved, such as with respect to gender equality, the right to reproductive health rights. We are living in a time when mass atrocities are committed in many conflict settings. International humanitarian law and human rights law are completely disregarded in broad daylight with no concern for any consequence from any quarter. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time of impunity. We are also in a time of women, children, and civilians, women, children, and civilians caught in the crossfire of guns in Sudan. 6.6 million people displaced within a matter of 7 months. Over 12,000 people died. Sudan is the world's largest child displacement crisis. Sudan is crying out for help. Is anyone listening? Is it even making the headlines today? Yes, we need to give attention to the plight that Palestinians are enduring in Gaza. Can we give a fraction of that attention to the Sudanese? Isn't the life of Sudanese worthy of our attention and concern, on par with the life of anyone in Gaza or in Ukraine? In my own country, Ethiopia, how many of us do we know that over 600,000 people perished by war in 2020, 2022? How many of us do know? This is the deadliest war in the world. Did we pay attention to that in the way we paid attention on a daily basis, on hourly basis, to the plight of Ukrainians who indeed deserve our attention? How many people today, as mentioned by the High Commissioner earlier on, live a life stripped of dignity because they do not have access to sanitation, to health care, water? How many people are living on the verge of famine, deprived of food security? How can we say that human rights and the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights matters to these people? Ladies and gentlemen, we have come a long way, but we haven't yet arrived. We are very, very far from the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If anything, we are drifting apart from it. We need to come back. Thank you very much.
What a sobering picture of where we are right now, especially on the continent. And we'll come back and talk about how we find our way back, because that's hopefully what we get to do here today, to remind ourselves of these commitments that were made and how to get ourselves back on the right path. Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. I want us to take a few minutes before we come back to you all in the plenary here across this panel, to just, now that we've painted a picture of where we are now, how we got here, I want us to cast our eye forward to where we go from here, how we get there, because we said we're making some pledges. So I'd like to hear from all of you up here, and I'll start with you, Njahira, on acknowledging the role of the actors, rewriting history. So what more do we do now for young people and those from diverse groups? Where do we go from here 10 years, 20 years from now?
I want us to move to a point of acceptance beyond awareness. I think we have to put a stop to awareness creations. I don't think anybody needs to be made aware that persons with disabilities exist anymore. It's too many years we've been around. And also for identities to be criminalized, they have to already exist. I want you to think about that anytime you find identities being criminalized. And criminalizing itself is an acknowledgement of existence, rest and ease. I think 75 years after the UDHR, can everybody who's out here being expected to champion and advocate for their rights labor from us? The consistent demand for labor to create awareness is one thing. Of ramps, for example, of wheelchairs exist. They're online, they're everywhere. And even that should be taken seriously, because that and the steepness or not steepness of a ramp can really mean very bad falls or very bad injuries. And the person on the other side, beyond having, there's someone who would have maybe added a few feet on the ramp and made it more smooth and safer. But then also it's a keenness, because I look at the screen for a sign language interpreter, and I can assure you it is not the recommended size for in case someone who's deaf was sitting right at the back. They would not be able to see the facial expressions of someone who's interpreting. And the second one for me is decoloniality. And decoloniality, as opposed to decolonization, it demands that we question how we know what we know. All the things that you know right now, you've been conditioned, you've been taught, also for a very specific purpose. So along with knowing our histories, for me it's especially important that we learn the versions of our elders and our ancestors, who are custodians of these stories, and also question the power dynamics and the value of human beings that's within those stories that are being told. And even along that, I think of how we most probably all know or read, facial or physical, visible, disfigurements, but they were not dangerous and people to be eradicated. So, and I also want to claim those. They speak for me, which is big. I want to talk about transnational solidarity. And we have to update the dreams and better ways of achieving human rights for those who are silent. I'm sure is a clip that or a phrase that we've been hearing quite often, especially if you're within the NGO spaces, south to south, which seems to demand that we settle for whatever little we get, because our post-colonial countries are not there yet. We don't have that kind of budget yet. Dystrophy, which is a condition I have, is a rare disease. And with that recognition by the UN, it brought to the attention that there are those rare diseases that are actually disabling with disabilities. And we have to demand that our country...
At the long term, you must understand Parliament only works within a mandate of 5 years. And legislation making is time-consuming and laborious. And there are times when there are very good legislations that come to Parliament, but because of political reasons or political divisions, used to be very critical of that. But I think we have come a long way. Human rights and enforcing and consolidating democracy is work in progress. And every term of Parliament that I've been, and I'm one of the longest members of Parliament, this is my 4th term. The other area that I find is very useful for parliamentarians much interested in some of the issues, particularly on human rights, because they seem like distant things. They're more interested in matters of day-to-day. But cohesion as well, Kenya. And you would be surprised every time when we go through those companies, those organizations, parastatal organizations, leave alone the rest of the country. Even Nairobi is limited. Another aspect, in fact, where we have been able to engage And I speak also having worked, and I commend the Secretary General of the United Nations for his push for respect for human rights, and also for there is a growing the upholding of the human rights values and principles, and we expect the rest of the world to continue to respect them, and to South Sudan, to the democratic.
Thank you. So, one, we have heard from the speakers, for example, the question of new technologies, something that we need to pay particular attention to. AI and other transformative technologies are creating a lot of threat to the rights and values underpinning the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and indeed international law writ large, are adhered to put in place effective regulatory framework in order to ensure that these technologies do not become a site for eroding the gains that we have made and for amplifying the perils and that exist in the world. So one area where we need to make urgent progress within the framework of upholding the values underpinning the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is putting in place a global framework for effective regulation of artificial intelligence and other new and emerging technologies. That is very, very critical. On our part, at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, we have adopted a resolution which assigned responsibility for undertaking a study with respect to the impact of these technologies and the specific experiences that we have on the African continent vis-a-vis these technologies, as my sister mentioned earlier on, with respect to gender equality, for example, but other aspects of issues as well. Honorable Yusuf mentioned one thing striking, that ordinary people do not pay attention to human rights. They think that it is not something of theirs. They bother about and are concerned with the day-to-day. I think this is an indictment on each and every one of us, because human rights is meant to be defining and affecting every realm of life, and those day-to-day issues of concern for them, including issues relating to work, livelihood, these are at the core of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But it is the way and the approach that we have taken so far that needs to change with respect to how we put premium and priority on these economic, social, and cultural rights, because I think whether or not people will continue to have faith or their faith in human rights would erode depends so much whether we make human rights relatable to the day-to-day life in societies writ large, across all sectors, as mentioned by my brother earlier on. I think this is an existential crisis for humanity as a whole, for whether or not we will have the space for upholding the rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So in the next 10 years and in the next 75 years, whether or not we would be celebrating the 150 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights depends so much whether we are able to make progress on the climate negotiations, in getting in place and investing in prerequisite. If we don't make progress, and progress so urgently, I'm not really sure if 75 years from today, the human family would be able to celebrate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and for perhaps that indictment on all of us. And it just reiterates what you were saying, Kariuki, about just continuing to gain public support, and also what the Honourable Member of Parliament had talked about, that perhaps we see it as that thing over there, but economic rights are human rights, sexual reproductive rights are human rights, persons with disability rights are human rights, women's rights are human rights, minorities' rights, children's rights, all of these are human rights, and so there's more work to be done to just getting the public support, and then from there getting the public and everybody else to act towards realizing this declaration, which we celebrate 75 years of today. I have a few minutes I would like to hear from the floor before we get to our next session, which, like I promised you, will be exciting. Any questions or comments or interventions that we have? For the sake of time and considering we already engaged you a little bit before, I would kindly have an important session where we'll hear from our keynote and go to Geneva for the pledges session. I see.
Not see more. Inviting us here today to join. It urges member states to promote a number of rights, civil, economic, social, political. All those rights are enshrined in the UDHR. As an NHRI, we are in the forefront of ensuring that these gaps and violations. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched our State of Human Rights report. It is on our website. I'd like to invite everyone here to look at it because it resonates with what Commissioner Dasso said when he said, yes, country talking to Kenyans and of Kenya from that engagement. But we continue to watch the socioeconomic rights of Kenya, the health issues, both mental and maternal, housing, cost of living, clean water, sanitation. Those are things of concern for Kenyans. Education, we see the cost of education actually marginalizing a lot of people. The issues around the results last week continue to be of concern to everyone, and we are wondering what standards are we telling out there, other people out there, that our education, have a whole document on that again on our website. Please look at it. We'll continue to order rights to security, security for all, police brutality, arbitrary arrests. Those are things we are watching. And also independence of institutions and the separation of powers. We continue to watch that. There are certain bills in the House we continue to monitor. I hope Mheshimiwa out there is also going to help us talk about those bills when they come up. The right to development, equality and equity in distribution of resources and opportunities is and I think for all Kenyans as we move on. Climate justice issues, displacement due to flooding and its impact are things that we are monitoring. Rights of the indigenous groups, minorities, older persons, women, youth, and the PWDs, issues of great concern. Access to justice and reparations issues we are watching. Business and human rights of refugees and migrants, and a lot of other issues. We continue to monitor, we continue to work, because collectively we can, and a human rights-based approach to anything is a powerful approach.
It is indeed. A little shorter. I have about 5 minutes to go. So let me start with the gentleman behind you, sir. Yes, go ahead. And then I'll
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maurice Odhiambo, I coordinate the Missing Voices Coalition, which is a civil society coalition which works on issues of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. And I'm very happy that the Attorney General is here, the Attorney General of the Republic of in line with the theme that we are discussing is the ratification by the Kenya government of the Convention on the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearances. This will help us a lot as civil society to push this agenda forward. We know that there are lots and lots of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances, and one of the things we do is usually to present data so that there can be action both from the government side but also from the civil society side. Secondly, which for me causes a bit of a dilemma for civil society, because you represent a very important institution, they are being implemented. And we need to really know what is going on at that level. If you even just take one document called the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. That document alone, if citizens can do to help pressure so that all that infrastructure that has been created and that is gobbling billions and billions of shillings then can work for the African people. Number two is rejection of democracy by the African elite. And I'm saying this with a lot of feeling because I'm looking at you not just as a representative of an important institution, but one of those people I call the African elite, because you help us to shape these institutions. If you go to the streets of Nairobi today and protest, and we saw that when the Gaza situation unfolded, and it has...
Thank you very much. And once again, I would like to re-emphasize what the Honorable Commissioner of the African Union has said, that of course no conflict or no suffering of any person is more important or prioritized on another conflict or the suffering of others. But unfortunately, this has not on everyone.
In this UN meeting, what we are suffering is, and thank you for the UN High Commission on Human Rights, he said, the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. My name is Gashehe. I coordinate Madara Social Justice Center. What we need to warn ourselves, and especially
of equality and justice, has inspired human rights treaties, ignited movements, and empowered voices worldwide, notably testing the very foundational issues upon our collective conscience on separate ships, adrift in a notion of the poorest of households in the country, which is supposed to afford affordable health care for all. 6, affordable housing program, which is meant to secure housing for low-income families. 7, the National Legal Aid, the Access to Information Act, which enables the public to access information held by governments. 9, the Kenya policy on public participation, which is meant to be a responsible way to conduct business. And finally, Persons Deprived of Liberty Act, an important initiative which we must mention is better, marginalized communities and to bridge the long-standing gap of inequality. Better has garnered international praise for its innovative approach enterprises, fostering a vibrant small business ecosystem for job creation and affordable housing for all Kenyans. Healthcare. This is meant to expand access to quality healthcare for improved well-being in our collective history, as Kenya stands proud to serve as one of the regional hubs for these momentous celebrations, unwavering dedication, driven by the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I think this has been evident. Its life, open and just society, forever evolving and striving to bridge the chasm between aspirations, have been instrumental in our journey to fulfill our human rights obligations. Their contributions extend beyond assistance in country report preparations. The national frameworks for upholding human rights, including the Universal Periodic Review Report, the Kenya Policy on Public Participation, championed by the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, and the National Policy and Action Plan on Human Rights. These invaluable contributions have fostered a flourishing culture of human rights, the very core of government, ensuring that human rights are not just aspirations, human rights, and we look forward to leveraging our shared commitment to human rights to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and the ambitious Africa 2063 agenda through continued fruitful collaboration in the years to come. The government of Kenya identified 4 human rights pledges reflecting the hopes and aspirations of the people. By committing to implement the pledges, the government embarks on a journey towards translating dialogue into meaningful action, paving the way for a society where the Universal Declaration on Human Rights becomes a lived-in reality.
And goings, the Honorable Attorney General Justin Muturi will be leading. The Honorable Attorney General Justin Muturi will be leading us through that. Regional, which is in Geneva, to follow the proceedings from there, because as we said, we're making the pledges roll. Towards ensuring, promoting, upholding, protecting human rights.
Or closing remarks on, but you'll have to do it during the next session. We're moving to individual states. We shall start to populate that tree with leaves representing each state until it blossoms into a full-fledged tree. But first of all, I want to connect pledge. Nairobi, habari.
I'm guessing you can hear that. Nairobi is here. We are vibrant. We are ready. Can you hear us? Nairobi to Geneva. Can you hear us? Super. We are joined by hundreds of participants here, including senior government officials, ambassadors, diplomatic representatives.
Shared and lived experiences and dreams. They form the basis of our commitments. From this rich tapestry of voices, 4 key human rights pledges emerged, which we firmly commit to implementing. 1, a national human rights policy.
Yeah.